working very closely with like advocates in Puerto Rico around just recovery after Hurricane Maria. And something that people talked about is rights. So you can think of like public participation as a series of rights that or promises that in this case the agency is making to the public, so they are able to participate. The first one is like the right to know. So this is like government transparency, just that you are as an institution providing the documents and also offering like training to communities so they can understand particular programs or programs in a plan, or maybe the plan itself of what it means specifically for their communities and not necessarily for a whole state or even a whole city. Maybe it is to think about what it will mean for neighborhoods. So again, this is like the right to know is so people get the pertinent information so they are actually able to participate. The right to say, so this might be like hosting a public hearing so you can actually listen to what people have to say about their needs. And of course, this like assumes that they will have some impact in what in the plan itself, because like you will listen and you can incorporate some of the changes based on that. So just to give you an example from Puerto Rico, I have been participating in the just like public comments for the action plan, and the action plan really says like how community development block grant disaster recovery funds, which are like more than $18 billion in Puerto Rico, how they will be used. And that plan has like 27 different programs for like housing recovery, economic development, for planning, for many types of like community needs. So you can write a letter, and the idea is that you can ask questions or you can express your concerns. And in the actually the chapter under today's class, I included some letters that I drafted, and I also included the responses that the government actually gave to my organization. And this is something as a planner you will have to do. You will have to address the public concerns. So it's not only that you listen, but you will also like answer to them. And it might be in many different ways, just answering through email. Usually there's some kind of documentation, so like phone is not good enough. You want to like, if somebody like contacts your phone, you can answer to them by phone, but you should document that and you should put it as part of your like technical reports and attachments when you are dealing with any project that you are responsible for. So that is the right to say, but I will say that you also have to respond and to listen and to address the concerns. Then we have like the right to choose, and in a lot of like planning, you will actually like think about different scenarios, and in surveys you could say what would you prefer, like A, B, or C for a project. You could say something, for example, we understand that this community is going to grow very rapidly over the next 50 years, and we would like to dedicate some space for natural conservation. So would you like to think of like a balance between like natural conservation and also growth? Would you prefer growth and less natural conservation, or would you prefer more natural conservation and less space for growth, which will mean more density, right? So there's like different scenarios that you can provide that are more about values, but it could be also about some scenario in where you say we have like this much money in just like funds for the city, and we have to allocate them between this project or that project. So what this is some kind of like prioritization. So you have to offer people alternatives, and you might do that, like for example in a neighborhood and thinking about various designs. Maybe there's different concepts to think about, or different kinds of housing that there could be there. So the idea is that the public needs to be able to choose between different alternatives. And this is like very common in many projects that are more of like master plans, which are like big thinking kinds of projects, or more like site planning, where you have like a development, for example, of a commercial strip in a neighborhood. In the case of Puerto Rico, the right to choose, it comes actually from thinking about if you stay in your community or if you leave your community. Because if the state is like giving you funds to relocate somewhere else, if your community is being flooded, you should have the right to choose to go somewhere else. But you should also have the right to stay. Even if you're a place that is flooded, you could raise a home. And in that way you can stay in your community if the funds by government then allows you to do that. In the case of the Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, if you go and visit New Orleans, you can see that many of the homes actually are elevated, and it's because people were given that choice of like staying and elevating their homes. In Puerto Rico, the local governments have decided that they're not going to give that choice, even though again federal government doesn't put restrictions on that, and you could elevate the home potentially. So they have decided that they're not going to do that. That's taking away the rights of residents and people that have been affected by flooding. Again, this is why advocates are saying we want the right to choose very loudly and emphatically. And the finally is like the right to equal treatment, and this refers to being treated in a just manner. It doesn't matter if you are an older adult or if you are a person who is low income. Maybe you're a person that have disabilities, or you don't speak English in a space that is predominantly English speaking. So the idea is that people are accommodated so they can actually participate. And the idea of like equity, I would say, is instead of like equality. But the idea here is that not everybody is like treated the same, but some people might need a special accommodation. So if you're an older adult, maybe you have to do an extra effort. Maybe you have to go to their home. Maybe you have to allow for paper forms as opposed to having to submit things online. And you could think about accessible accommodations of places that are accessible by public transportation to the spaces that you do your meeting, or maybe they have again ADA accessible bathrooms in that particular space. So always be thinking about how you can actually further equality.